Today's global energy crisis is changing the world permanently, and it will never be the same. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is causing global leaders all around the world to reshape how they look at energy. It's causing public opinion to shift about where we think energy should come from and how we should use energy, and it all points to nuclear, because nuclear is not only absolutely necessary for global energy production and to increase that in the future, but it is also the absolute best possible solution by a huge margin compared to every alternative. And as a bonus, we are also going to look at a way that you can profit off of this global shift far into the future. Ready? Let's dive in. This video is sponsored by Uranium Energy Corp, but more on that later. The world is going through some massive changes right now due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. It has thrown global energy supply chains into absolute chaos as many countries are waking up to the fact that they are completely reliant on Russia for energy. And if you know anything about energy, you know energy is basically wealth, it's basically growth. Taking a look back at history throughout time, starting in the 1800s, we see that biomass was the number one place to get energy. So starting off at this time, you're looking at somebody who basically finds out, hey, I can burn stuff and make energy from it. A long time ago when we discovered fire, it was, hey, I can make fire. I can keep myself warm. That keeps me healthier to be able to produce more food, go get more food, build more shelter. I can cook my food, get more nutrients out of it so I don't have to spend as much time getting food. That evolved and advanced to the point where we were able to discover other forms of energy like coal. When we discovered coal, we started being able to make steam engines and machinery. We were able to offload human energy, human labor to machines. After coal, we discovered oil and we're able to offload more and more energy of our own energy to those energy sources. And if you look throughout time, we can see that as time progresses, we discover new forms of energy that are more dense than the last one. Biomass is not as energy dense as coal. Coal is not as energy dense as oil, and so on and so on. However, it doesn't mean we stop using that old form of energy. It just means we start using a lot more energy. Take a look at the progression through time. We can see that these new forms of energy that are more energy dense layer on top of what we used to use. Today, nuclear energy provides about 10% of the world's total electricity, and there are only 440 nuclear reactors in the entire planet. And specifically in the United States, there are about 93 nuclear reactors, and they provide about 20% of our nation's electricity usage. So nuclear energy is extremely dense. Like I said, like we pointed out, it provides about 10% of the global energy that is needed. However, there's only about 440 around the entire world. It's so energy dense that if you have enough uranium to fill up this cup, that would provide more electricity than you would ever use in your entire life. Now, to put this into perspective, how energy dense nuclear is, if we take a look at solar panels and you wanted to power the entire United States with just solar panels, you would need to take up 21,250 square miles. To put that into perspective, that is just under the total size of West Virginia. Not to mention the problems with that, which would mean that we only get electricity when the sun is out versus something like nuclear that provides that power 100% of the time. Contrast that with nuclear power plants, we would need about 400 more nuclear power plants to provide the same amount of electricity that all of our electricity generation in the United States provides, and each power plant only takes up about 1 1 square mile. So the entire state of West Virginia for solar versus 400 square miles more. And that provides some insight into the environmental aspect of this too, because when you consider creation of much more energy and electricity into the future, which is necessary for growth and for advancement in a society, you look at something like solar and realize, hey, we're going to have to decimate these populations of animals. We're going to have to eradicate populations of birds and turtles and groundhogs and all of these animals and wildlife and ecosystems to generate that electricity from solar and wind and other forms of energy versus a very, very small local environmental impact from nuclear power plants. And you're probably thinking, well, wait, what about the nuclear waste? I'm glad you brought that up. All nuclear waste ever produced, and remember, nuclear energy provides 10% of global energy. All nuclear waste ever produced can fit inside of a football field 3 stories high. It is by far the lowest amount of waste produced by any energy production. Because of this, the tide is changing. Public sentiment is changing. The latest poll from Bisconti Research found that lately especially, public support for nuclear energy has been skyrocketing. And the best part about this is it is not just one party. The left favors nuclear because they're waking up to the fact that nuclear is the cleanest form of energy. There's no carbon released. It's completely carbon neutral. It's extremely energy dense, and so your impact on local wildlife population is extremely minimal. The amount of waste produced is almost none comparing against all other forms of energy production. And it's extremely safe. The number of people who have died in all of history related to nuclear energy production is basically a rounding error for the average year of energy production for all other forms of energy production like natural gas, oil, coal, and other forms of energy production. So the left is starting to wake up and get very, very interested in nuclear. Similarly, on the right, people are very interested in nuclear because on the right, many people just care about abundant and cheap energy. Guess what? Nuclear would do that. Pause, detour here. Did you know that we do not have a shortage of water on this earth? In fact, about 1/3 of this earth is covered with water. However, we have a salt problem, right? All we have to do is get the salt out of the water and we have plenty of water to go around. The problem is the energy cost to suck that salt out of that water. There's a big energy cost with it, and so it's cheaper to just get water deep out of the ground and drain our reserves because it costs a lot of energy, takes a lot of energy that costs a lot to get that ocean water into a drinkable form. Guess what would solve that? Abundant and cheap energy. Did you know also that you can suck gasoline out of the air? That's right. It is absolutely possible to make gasoline and diesel fuel by pulling carbon dioxide out of the air. But what's the cost? That's right. It takes a lot of electricity to be able to do that. What would solve that problem? Abundant and cheap energy. This is why energy is such a big deal to global growth. We could have unlimited free water if we just had enough cheap electricity. We could have unlimited free carbon neutral gasoline and diesel if only we had enough electricity. And it's not just public sentiment that is changing either. We're also starting to see bipartisan support from lawmakers for advancing nuclear energy. Democratic and Republican senators have introduced the International Nuclear Energy Act of 2022. Senator Barrasso led a bill to ban Russian uranium imports. The fact of the matter is that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has drastically changed the way the rest of the world is looking at where it gets its energy from. But the problem is, right now, most of the world gets most of their energy from Russia. And you think, well, not the US, right? Not so fast. Remember I said 20% of the United States electricity production comes from nuclear? Where do we get our uranium? Almost half of it comes from Russia, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan. This is why leaders around the world are scrambling to say, hey, we need to increase nuclear production because we are ramping up our energy use and we don't have enough. We're reliant on fossil fuels from Russia. And now they're looking to the other source of abundant energy and they're realizing, oh no, we're reliant on Russia for that too. And here is where we transition into the opportunity to make a lot of money from this. There has been underinvestment in uranium production for years, just like oil, just like many other commodities, and the world is shifting from a growth tech mentality on where investors are funneling money to real assets, commodities, energy. And as we ban Russian uranium and move to production of United States-based uranium, money's going to start flooding there because guess what? Where the laws go, the money follows. And that's why venture funding for startups focused on nuclear energy have been absolutely spiking recently. Now, for an opportunity like this, you can always just go and Google uranium ETFs, just like you could do that for oil, you could do that for gold, for silver, for copper, for all sorts of things. And if you peg the timing of the commodity super cycle right, or whatever cycle you're talking about, just getting broad exposure to that industry is going to give you some great profits long term. But we can do better than that. We're going to talk about a company called Uranium Energy Corp. Full disclosure, I own this company. I'm a shareholder. But this could potentially be one of the best uranium plays available to investors. If we take a look at some of the information about UEC, the first thing that we know is that we've got massive institutional and insider ownership. Between insiders and institutions combined, almost 47% of shares are held by institutions and insiders. Top institutional holders include BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, UBS, Fidelity, and many more. These guys are big money. They don't mess around. And the reason why these large institutions are able to invest in this company is because it's a big size company. It's listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and it's got a market cap of just under $1 billion. So what is it that these institutional companies like about UEC so much? Well, number one, they are American. That is the number one. So you don't have a lot of this jurisdictional risk with companies located around the world. And given the track record and the recent trends from US lawmakers, that's something you'd want to see in a company, because if we're looking to ban uranium imports from Russia, looking to start spending taxpayer dollars on increasing domestic production, it's going to be companies like UEC that are going to benefit from this. Number two, they pioneered something called in situ recovery, ISR technology. This is a way to get uranium out of the ground where basically you can flip a switch. Most uranium mining and oil mining and things like that, you can't just flip a switch. You've either got production, you've got it pulling out of the ground, you've got it on, or if you shut it down, it's shut down. It's very costly to shut down, and it's shut down for a long time, many times permanently. This is a different type of a way to recover uranium from the ground that you absolutely can just treat it like you're flipping a switch. It essentially takes hyper-oxygenated water, injects it into the ground, that dissolves the uranium, and they're able to pull it out really easily and then process it for further refinement. The reason why this is a big deal is because they're sitting on a lot of uranium right now that they don't have to be producing at these low uranium prices. When uranium prices get higher, they can start pulling it out of the ground. And if uranium prices for some reason drop back down again, they can stop production and they don't have to worry about pulling it out of the ground at subpar prices. The second reason this could be an extremely profitable play is because they're completely unhedged. This means that they are not shorting uranium in order to cover their bases. So if we do see this cycle take off, like many very brilliant investors think we are going to, it means that they're going to take off like a rocket because they don't have any bets on the other side holding their profits down. Now, you know I like to take a look at the financials. I like to look at the balance sheet, and you can see they've got number one, zero debt down here. That is a fantastic thing to see. It really eliminates a lot of the risk, especially as interest rates go up. If you have to roll that debt over, you don't want to see debt on the balance sheet if at all possible. The second thing here is going to be the total assets, about $170 million in cash and cash equivalents. this is where it gets really interesting because a big portion of that cash is actually physical uranium stored in warehouses. In fact, they currently have about 2 million pounds of uranium currently stored in warehouses, again, not in the ground, in warehouses that they could sell at any moment if the uranium prices get to a point where it would be profitable enough for them. In addition to the 2 million pounds that they already have in warehouses, they're under contract for another 3 million to put in warehouses with an all-in cost of 5 million pounds at $38 a pound. This means it's all already profitable here. They're already in the money on these pounds of uranium, but at any point, uranium gets expensive enough, they can sell it for a nice profit. And the final cherry on top is this company called Uranium Royalty Corp. This is the only royalty company for uranium, and UEC just happens to own about 15 million shares of this company. Now, you know I love royalty companies, and so if you buy UEC, you basically get both, 2 for 1. You get some exposure to UROY, the royalty company, and you get the pure uranium play from UEC as well. Given the fact that global energy needs are increasing drastically over time, always have and always will, and 2, public sentiment towards nuclear energy is changing quickly because people, regardless of political affiliation, are realizing, number 1, it's the best solution and it's the only solution. And then number 3, political trends are changing as countries are realizing we want to get off Russia. We want to wean ourselves off Russia. That means uranium sourced from places like the United States is only going to become more and more valuable over time, both to the United States and to the rest of the world. Given all of that, a company like UEC could do extremely well into the future. And again, just to let you know, I do own the company. So take everything I say with a grain of salt because on one hand, yes, I'm talking my book. On the other hand, there's some skin in the game here. I like to share companies with you that I also own. Do your own research, make your own decisions. At the end of the day, I'm just some guy on the internet, so don't listen to me for financial advice because this is not financial advice. This is for education and entertainment purposes only. As always, I really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.